I went to Bear Ridge to be alone and unplug. No phone, no people, no footprints but mine. Just trees, sky, and the kind of silence that empties your head. The drive took me 6 hours north, most of it on winding roads that hadn't seen maintenance in years. After that, I hiked until the trail all but vanished beneath grass. By late afternoon, I found a clearing that didn't feel like it belonged on any map. It was a shallow bowl of earth ringed by ancient pine, unnaturally still. There were no signs of wildlife, no birds, no squirrels, not even a single rustled leaf. Just quiet, thick and unmoving. I set up camp anyway. I needed the break. Between the burnout, the sleepless nights, and the gnawing sense that something had been closing in on me, I had to get away. The tent went up quickly. I gathered wood, lit a fire, and let the familiar rhythm of preparation calm my nerves. It worked for a while. As dusk settled, the sky turned amber between the trees. I drank coffee from a dented metal cup and listened to the fire crackle against the quiet. It wasn't peaceful. It was a silence with weight, like something holding its breath just out of reach. I stayed by the fire a little longer, telling myself it was just nerves. New surroundings always stirred something primitive in the brain. Eventually, I climbed into the tent, zipped it shut, and lay down with my pistol beside me. I told myself I'd feel better in the morning. I didn't fall asleep easily. I kept listening for something I couldn't name, my heart ticking faster every time the canvas rustled. Somewhere past midnight, I finally drifted off, but I woke to a sound that didn't belong. Low, deliberate, and horribly close. Scratching. I held perfectly still, barely breathing, as the sound of scratching traced a slow arc along the back wall of the tent. It wasn't frantic or random. It was steady, almost purposeful, like it was testing the boundary between us. The tent wall pushed in slightly, reacting to something brushing against it from the outside. Whatever was out there knew where I was, and it wasn't afraid. I reached for my pistol in the dark, moving with the kind of care you only use when your life might depend on it. My fingers wrapped around the handle, slick with cold sweat. I waited, listening, heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. The scratching stopped. Whatever had been moving stopped completely, as if it knew I was listening. Then something pressed lightly against the canvas. So lightly, I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't been awake. It moved along the tent wall with chilling precision. I placed my finger on the trigger. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't dare breathe too loud. I counted in my head, trying to calm the panic. 10 seconds, 20, 30. The pressure disappeared. The scratching didn't return. I waited another minute before I unzipped the flap just enough to peek outside. Cold air spilled in, sharp and immediate, like I'd torn a hole in something I wasn't supposed to. I scanned the clearing, searching for anything out of place. There were no footsteps, no broken branches, but the back of the tent was different. 3 clean slashes ran through the fabric, parallel and deep, as if something with claws had traced them with intent. And just below the lowest one, something had disturbed the grass. A print, wide, too wide for a boot. I backed away slowly, the pistol still in my hand. The forest around me felt too quiet again, like it was watching. I didn't go back to sleep. I just sat by the fire, feeding it wood, staring into the dark. I watched the tree line for hours, waiting for something to move, but the woods stayed still, too still. like they were holding something back. The fire gave off little warmth, but I kept feeding it anyway. As long as it burned, I felt like I had some control, some defense. At some point, the dark faded into a pale gray dawn. The light didn't comfort me. It only made the forest look colder. I circled the tent again, inspecting every inch of the clearing. The claw marks hadn't changed. The print was still there. There were no tracks leading away. It was like the thing had come from nowhere and vanished the same way. I tried to make breakfast, but I couldn't eat. Every sound behind me made my shoulders tighten. A pine cone hit the ground a few feet away. I spun, heart racing, but nothing was there. I told myself to relax. Maybe it was a fluke, a stray bear or a cougar passing through. But I didn't believe it. I'd seen bears. I'd tracked cougars. They don't move like that, and they don't press fingers against tents. By midday, I debated hiking back, but something about the way the trail had disappeared behind me made me hesitate. I couldn't remember seeing any trail markers, and the trees around me had begun to blur together, taller, tighter, like the forest was shifting behind my back. I wasn't sure I could retrace my steps without getting lost, so I stayed. One more night. I'd leave first thing in the morning, before the fog had time to settle in. That's what I told myself, but part of me already knew I'd made a mistake. The day passed in uneasy silence. I didn't hear a single bird. There was no rustling in the underbrush, not even the hum of insects. It was like the forest had emptied itself, or worse, like everything was still there, but hiding. I stayed close to the fire, sharpening my axe in slow, deliberate strokes, not because I thought it would help, but because it gave me something to hold on to. When I walked to the stream for water, I kept checking over my shoulder. Every snapping twig sounded wrong, like it was meant to draw attention. I refilled my bottles and turned back quickly. The forest felt tighter somehow, like the trees had leaned in while I was gone. Back at camp, I laid more wood near the fire and checked the perimeter again. Nothing had changed, but I still didn't feel alone. Dusk crept in faster than it had the night before. Shadows stretched longer. The sky was a featureless sheet of gray, the kind of dull light that drains the world of contrast and warns you night is coming fast. I didn't wait for dark this time. I lit the fire early and kept it high. The heat was comforting, but I still felt the weight of something out beyond the flame. I sat with my back to a log and kept my eyes fixed on the woods. The fire crackled. Sparks danced up into the sky, and just as I began to settle, I heard it again. That sound, low and soft, scraping against bark. But this time, it wasn't near the tent. It was circling, not crashing through the brush or creeping low, but tracing slow arcs around the clearing, like it was studying me. The sound moved slowly, brushing across tree trunks like it was tracing a path. It circled the camp with unhurried steps, just outside the firelight. Every instinct told me not to follow it, to stay where the flame still held back the dark. But I couldn't sit still. I stood, grabbed my pistol and flashlight, and took one step toward the trees. The sound stopped. The forest seemed to hold its breath. I held my breath and listened. The silence was almost painful now, like pressure building behind my ears. Then came a single crack, wood snapping under weight, not far off, deliberate. I raised the flashlight, aimed it toward the noise, and scanned the brush. Nothing moved, but something had been standing there. The branches were still swaying. The flashlight flickered once, then again. I smacked it against my palm. The beam steadied, but when I swept it back across the trees, I saw something duck out of sight. Not an animal. It moved too smoothly, too intelligently. I stepped back toward the fire. The shadows pulled back slightly as I stepped toward the flame, like they recognized the boundary. My heart was hammering, but I didn't call out. I knew, somehow, that it would respond if I did. Whatever was out there wasn't trying to scare me. It wanted me comfortable. It wanted me close. I added more wood to the fire, stacking it high until the flames roared. The light stretched further into the trees, but instead of pushing the darkness back, it gave it form, made it feel like something alive. I sat with my back against a log, pistol in hand and flashlight within reach. The clearing felt smaller now, like the trees had crept in closer while I wasn't looking. Every few minutes, I heard something shift. Light footfalls maybe, always, just beyond the reach of the firelight. Whatever it was, it didn't move like a four-legged animal. The steps were slow and too even, and there was a pattern to them, like pacing. It wasn't hunting, it was waiting. I thought about running, but I knew how fast the woods turned disorienting. Without sunlight, without a trail, I wouldn't last half an hour out there, and I didn't know if it would follow me or cut me off. So I stayed near the fire. Every crackle felt louder than it should. Every pop of sap made my shoulders flinch. The night dragged. I kept checking my watch, but time felt wrong, slow and heavy, like the hours weren't moving at all. At one point, I thought I saw something at the edge of the light. Not movement, just a shape, tall and lean, too thin to be a person. I blinked, and it was gone. The trees swallowed it whole. I didn't sleep that night. I sat upright beside the fire, watching shadows stretch and curl with every flicker of flame, waiting for a sound I hoped I wouldn't hear again. The pacing had stopped hours ago, but the silence left behind was worse, thick with attention, like something was still watching me from the edge of the dark. Each time the fire popped, I flinched. Even the smallest sound felt like it might signal something else creeping closer. By the time dawn arrived, I hadn't moved. My joints ached, my breath hung in the cold air, and my grip on my gun hadn't loosened in hours. I packed quickly. I skipped breakfast, skipped the coffee, just shoved gear into my pack and started walking east, away from where I came. The forest seemed normal at first, brighter even, as sun filtered through the pines. But within 20 minutes, I noticed the shift. Trees growing too close, shadows stretching wrong, the terrain subtly unfamiliar. There were no landmarks, no trail markers, just a disorienting wall of trunks that all looked the same. I knew I'd already lost my path. Then I started seeing them again. Those impressions in the moss, long finger-like shapes pressed into the earth. No heel, no claw, just deliberate weight and direction. They weren't scattered. They looped around trees, avoided rocks, following the terrain like breadcrumbs meant to lead me somewhere I didn't want to go. I crouched beside one, placing my hand next to it. The print was wider than my palm and deeper, like something heavy had leaned in. I stood, heart pounding, and scanned the woods. Every shadow felt stretched too long, like it was waiting to take shape. The silence had returned, thick and vacant. Even the wind seemed to avoid this part of the forest. Then I heard it again, dry and deliberate. A dragging sound, like fingers trailing through wet leaves, somewhere behind me. I turned slowly, gripping the pistol, but there was nothing there. Still, I wasn't alone. I didn't run. That was the one rule I'd always followed in the woods. Never run unless you're being chased. But in that moment, I wasn't sure whether I already was. I started walking again, faster than before, watching every angle, every shadow, every ridge of bark that looked even slightly out of place. The dragging sound didn't follow me, but I couldn't shake the sense that it had already moved ahead. That whatever it was didn't need to follow behind. It just needed to guide me somewhere. After another hour of wandering, I crested a shallow rise and saw something that stopped me cold. A shape on the forest floor, half buried beneath pine needles and rot. It was a pack, faded green canvas with cracked leather straps and a rusted zipper. I approached cautiously and nudged it with the toe of my boot. The style was decades old, but the fabric hadn't rotted. It hadn't been there long. Inside, I found a water flask, the remnants of a wool blanket, and a journal sealed in a Ziploc bag that was yellowed with age, but still intact. I didn't open it right away. Something about it felt less like an invitation and more like a warning. Around the pack, the ground had been disturbed. I crouched down and saw more of those finger-shaped impressions. Only these were arranged in a circle around the pack, like something had stood there for a long time, or crouched like it was waiting. The realization hit me with a cold weight. I wasn't the first person to come through these woods. I wasn't the first it had chosen, and something told me I wouldn't be the last. I finally opened the journal after moving several yards away from where I found it. Sitting near that pack made my skin crawl, like I was being watched through the trees. The pages were damp but legible, filled with tight, slanted handwriting. The entries were dated, some as old as 1979, and they all followed the same pattern. Day 1 was hopeful. Day 2 mentioned the silence. By day 3, the writer had stopped recording locations and started describing something in the woods. They called it the shadow with joints that bend the wrong way. They said it never touched them, just circled at night. They also said it learned their name without asking. The last entry was short, just a sentence scrawled across the bottom of a half-torn page. It wants me to follow it. I think I already have. I closed the journal and stuffed it back in the bag without thinking. Every instinct I had was telling me to leave it behind, but something deeper, something I couldn't explain, told me I'd need it. The light was beginning to fade again. The sky overhead was clouded, dull, and colorless. The kind of gray that meant night would fall fast. I didn't bother looking for a new campsite. There was no point pretending I'd sleep. I picked a spot with a clear view of the tree line, set my pack down slowly, and built a fire with shaking hands. Whatever had followed that man decades ago, it was still here, and now it had followed me. No context, no real explanation. I built the fire high and wide, using every scrap of dry wood I could find. The flame crackled loudly in the stillness, the only sound for miles around. I didn't set up the tent. I didn't even bother unrolling the sleeping bag. I just sat there, facing the trees, waiting. The woods around me didn't feel like wilderness anymore. They felt like a room with no corners, a space that shifted when you weren't looking. I kept the journal in my lap, fingers tracing the warped edges of the pages. Part of me wanted to tear it apart. Part of me wanted to finish reading. But I didn't turn the page. Not yet. The fire didn't reach far, but it drew a perimeter, a fragile circle of warmth that felt like the last safe place left. And even that was shrinking. Just past the fire's edge, something moved. Not fast, not aggressive, just a slow shift of shape between the trees. I kept my eyes fixed on the tree line, afraid that blinking would make it move. The shape stepped closer, still hidden, still just out of reach of the light. And then it stopped, not 10 feet away, close enough that I could hear it breathing. But the sound wasn't from lungs. It was too dry, too hollow, like something drawing breath through a broken reed. It knew the fire wouldn't last, and it could wait. I didn't blink. I couldn't. The shape stayed where it was, motionless, as if it was waiting for something, maybe for me to flinch or speak or step beyond the firelight. The breathing grew slower, steadier, like it was settling in, like it knew I wasn't going anywhere. Then I saw something in the glow of the firelight, just a glint, reflection off the eyes, but they weren't shaped like eyes. They were long, narrow, vertical, like slits carved into wet stone. They didn't blink. They just shimmered in the dark. I backed up slowly, careful not to cross the boundary of heat and light. Even as I moved, the thing didn't follow. It didn't need to. It knew the fire would die eventually, and it had patience. That's when I understood what he meant. This thing didn't chase. It lured. With silence, with pressure, with time. And once it had your attention, it waited. Until curiosity, or fear, or exhaustion finally pulled you across the line. And even though it never opened a mouth, I could feel it trying to speak. Not in sound, in memory, in dread. It was trying to show me something. Something buried. Not fast, not violent, just a single, deliberate motion that felt too calm to be human. I don't remember dropping the journal, but it landed open near the fire. I kneeled down next to it. My thumb hovered over the final page, and I realized I was scared to turn it. But I did. It's under the earth. It waits for the fire to die. That was all it said. I looked up, and the ground near the tree line was moving. Not from wind. There was no wind. The ground was rippling, not like it was blowing in wind, but like something beneath it was shifting. The air grew heavy. The light dimmed around me. The fire snapped and spat, but it didn't chase back the dark like it had before. The ground swelled under the grass, bulging slowly, like something was rising toward the surface. Then it stopped. The ground peeled back gently, like the forest itself was parting to reveal what it had hidden. It wasn't a creature in any familiar sense. It was something pretending to wear a shape. Long arms, no face. Its skin looked like bark left to rot in a swamp, spongy, veined, and barely holding shape. It didn't climb out. It unfolded. It stood taller than a man, but too thin, too stretched. Its limbs bent in ways that didn't belong to anything natural. I don't know how long I stared. Time didn't feel real anymore. The light from the fire felt miles away. It didn't make a real sound, just a wet stretching, like bark tearing under pressure. The pressure built my eyes, like pressure before a migraine. I felt it before I understood it. It wasn't trying to kill me. It was trying to speak. Not with sound, with memory, with weight. I felt it reaching inside my mind, not with words, but with pressure, like it was reshaping the fear into something deeper, more permanent. Visions bloomed behind my eyes, moss-covered hills that pulsed like breathing lungs, hands reaching up from tree roots, mouths without faces, whispering in languages I didn't understand. I don't know if it came from the earth or if the earth made it, but I knew one thing without doubt. This place belonged to it, and now it had noticed me. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I don't remember standing. I don't remember grabbing my bag. One moment, I was staring into the thing's face, or where a face should have been, and the next, I was running. The forest didn't fight me at first. It opened up just enough to give me hope. Then it twisted. Branches tore at my arms. Roots grabbed at my boots. The trees leaned in until there was no sky left. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Away from the clearing. Away from the moss. Away from the thing that had finally stepped into the firelight. The fire behind me cracked once, then hissed into silence. The heat and light vanished in the same breath. I tripped over something, a rock, maybe, and hit the ground hard, my palms slamming into dirt and pine needles. When I rolled to get up, it was already there, closer than before, moving without sound. I swung the pistol around, but it caught on a low branch. The handle jerked from my hand and vanished into the dark. Fingers, not hands, fingers wrapped around my ankle. I kicked, fought, cried out, but it was like the forest absorbed the sound. I was being dragged, back toward the clearing, back toward the place where the grass had peeled away, where the ground had opened like a mouth. I don't remember how I escaped. One moment, I was being dragged across the forest floor, dirt in my mouth, blood in my eyes, and the next, I was waking up to sunlight. My pack was gone. The journal, too. The clearing was nowhere in sight. I was lying beside the old ranger road, half covered in moss and pine needles, like I'd been dropped there. It let me go. Not out of mercy, because it had already done what it came to do. I didn't panic. I just kept moving, slow and steady, like if I stopped, the woods would change their mind. I found my truck where I left it, tires sunken in the mud, windshield streaked with pollen and dust. I climbed in and drove until the trees thinned and the signal bars came back. I didn't stop. Not for food, not for gas. Not until I hit pavement that didn't feel like it could swallow me whole. It's been weeks now. I still can't sleep more than an hour at a time. Sometimes I hear something pacing around the cabin at night, just outside the window, just past the edge of the porch light. I don't check. I don't open the door. The woods didn't want to keep me. They wanted me to leave changed, and I did. Some things in the woods don't chase you. They wait for you to bring them home. If this story left you with a lingering chill, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss one of my stories. And tell me, what would you have done if you saw those marks in the moss? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching Cabin of Whispers. See ya next time.